So anthropology is sensitive to the numerous ways states control their subject populations. The analysis of these practices, however, is still governed by notions of cultural and historical particularism. It is assumed that they are novel and unique as arising as responses to geographical specific obstacles to state power. A closer comparison of the history of these practices shifts attention to overlooked aspects of state formation. Far from being new, these practices bear a disturbing resemblance to strategies used by former imperial powers to control their subjects and repress resistance. Colonial and imperial practices can therefore manifest itself as forms of physical, cultural, and political domination that can be reanimated by contemporary states struggling to govern, control, or protect their subjects. This statecraft is learned, passed down, and reinforced through time. This is not to say they do not change nor adapt. Rather, continuity implies how the resilience of state formations requires constant maintenance, versatility, and improvisation. Some colonial practices do not require resuscitation. As many post-colonial theorists, from Paul Gilroy to Fernando Oretz, have demonstrated, they instead persist as institutionalized state practices backed up by hegemonic and unquestioned cultural assumptions about state power, race, ethnicity, and national identity formed through under colonial enterprise. This panel seeks to compare a number of ethnographic case studies of colonial reanimations from the Mediterranean, East Africa, to Polynesia. It follows the workings of state agents it follows the workings of state agents engaged in the establishment and maintenance of such political legacies and continuities. Indeed, colonial reanimations are nothing if not uncanny. On a simple level, current manifestations of half-forgotten forms of colonialism often produce a sense of unease that result in nostalgia, melancholy, anxiety, conspiracy, despair, and future-oriented hope. On a more anthropological level, they are uncanny in the way identified by Rebecca Bryant, an awareness that actions now will shape the future and perhaps haunt it. In moments of crisis, our colonial and imperial past is drawn upon to navigate the present, guiding contemporary state practices and policies through a lens of nostalgia and longing of an imaginary past. While specific state practices may share commonality across contexts owing to their imperial past, it is crucial to note that not all forms of imperialism are uniform. There are important differences between the various imperial projects, be it British, Ottoman, Spanish, or French, as demonstrated in the variety of state tactics, ideologies, and discourses. Nevertheless, there are intriguing similarities across the global north and the global south as to how imperial formations are reanimated and used. In the global south, post-colonial nations have adopted tactics previously utilized by the colonizers to pacify and seize control of the land. In the global north, by contrast, former imperial powers have rediscovered and revived colonial forms of domination and are now deploying them against citizens and migrants. Stated otherwise, it is our task to explore not only the specificity of different colonial imperial projects, but also pick apart their commonalities by exploring the lineage of the actors involved. Northern Ireland in general, and Belfast especially, offers a really perfect opportunity to explore and dissect such colonial reanimations. The colonization of the northern province of Ulster is one of the early colonial projects enacted by the British monarchy. After the failed rebellion of the O'Neills, the north of Ireland was colonized by loyal English and Scottish Protestants, while the native Gaelic peasantry would be forced into the Highlands. The Gaelic nobility would flee, and many would eventually serve the Spanish Empire in its conquest and colonization of South America. the so-called plantation of Ulster would also come to form the foundation of Northern Ireland's sectarian divide. Fast forwarding 300 years and skipping over the famine and the 1798 rebellion, and Northern Ireland has been partitioned from the Irish Free State. Since its inception, Northern Ireland has been segregated, with Unionist, Loyalist, predominantly Protestant communities having far better access to state resources, political representation, and so on. Inspired by the civil rights movement in the United States, people in Northern Ireland demanded equal rights for Catholics. However, various British governments failed to acknowledge the inequality within Northern Ireland, prompting some to resort to political violence. In response, British forces, supplemented by local loyalist paramilitaries, were used to repress the Catholic minority. A prominent figure was Brigadier General Frank Kitson, a British military officer who formerly served during the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. The tactics and state practices he introduced to quell dissent were a direct continuation of practices used in Kenya, resulting in some of the worst tragedies of the Northern Irish conflict, such as the Balliger massacre. In this panel, we seek to understand such colonial continuities and their uncanny reanimations in the contemporary. When our panel concludes today at 1 p.m, we will be making an excursion to the Ballymurphy estate in Belfast, taking a bus here from Queen's University Belfast, and we'll be meeting with local activists, this is John here, and to learn and understand more about the troubles in Northern Ireland and how today local groups seek recognition and justice for the victims of British state violence. Thank you.